Good morning, everybody. And it is morning just about in the UK, 11:31. Welcome, everybody. Delighted to see you all. I can see people queuing up in the room, new names and names that were here from earlier on this morning. Thank you for joining us for the second session of the Learning Technologies Autumn Forum for 2024. Again, you start with me, Andrew Jacobs. Don Taylor still having his Wi-Fi problems where he happens to be right now, which is unfortunate. So you're stuck with me for the day. There we go. Anyway, really great session to kick us off, Megla, first of all, and really keen to see how people engage with this session as well. There's a load of stuff that came out from the first thing this morning about how we're going to use AI in the future, but how we're actually going to use learning in the future, I think, is really important. So to do that, we've got two fabulous guests. We've got Beck Ford, Beck Ford, Head of Talent and Inclusion at Burger King, and Helen Marshall, who's the Chief Learning Officer from Thrive. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you two have got for us this morning. I know the session's quite interactive, so I'll be looking for loads of comments from everybody in the chat, so please make sure you keep that chat running. Over to you two.
Brilliant. Thanks, Andrew. And we are very happy to have you here, as much as we're missing Don as well. But yeah, I managed to join Egla's session this morning as well and quickly updated some of my slides to get a reflection on some of her session in here as well. So I'm glad to hear this. There are some people that were on that session this morning, but hopefully will make sense either way. As Andrew said, I'm joined by the wonderful Beck Ford, and I'll let Beck introduce herself in a second. But I'm Chief Learning Officer at Thrive, an all-in-one learning management system. And I've delivered quite a few of these learning trends sessions over the years, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in just a moment. But Beck, if you wanted to do a quick intro to you and your role, and I suppose you're a bit of a unique situation at Burger King as well.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. So I'm Beck. I joined Burger King in 2021. And I think when people think about Burger King, you think we're a kind of global brand. We've been around for ages, which obviously we have. We are the master franchise in the UK. So as we are now, our business, we were formed in 2017. So when I joined in 2021, we were relatively like a startup business. Obviously joined during kind of COVID, and I don't want to kind of harp on about COVID because I think it bores everyone to tears now. But yeah, with the master franchise, we have about 300 sites. When I joined, we had about 142. So we've had a rapid kind of growth. We're about just half of the UK sites that are owned by ourselves now. So yeah, we've been on a bit of a journey. So I'll tell you more about that as we kind of go through the session. But that's kind of who I am and where I'm from.
And I think we're taking a slightly different tactic with this session today, in that, yes, we're talking about some of the trends that are happening right now and that are going to inform your learning strategies in the coming year. But we really wanted to bring that to life with some practical examples, which is why Beck's here, because she's doing such fabulous work at Burger King. So yes, we'll provide that kind of industry context to what we're speaking about, and then Beck can provide some really practical examples. Now, I'm just going to caveat the start of this session with, like I just said, I've presented a few of these learning trend sessions over the past couple of years. And what I always return to is the fact that L&D need to be doing some fundamental things in order to then respond effectively to wider trends and hot topics within the industry. So we'll explain more about that as we go along. First of all, would like to say that we are going to do some interactive Slidos in this session. So if you do just want to scan the QR code quickly, if you're joining from desktop and are able to on your phones. Alternatively, if you're not able to do that, you can join Slido via a browser or via your phone at slido.com. And you can just enter the hashtag number that you can see on screen there, and you'll be able to join. So you can do that now, or when the questions come up later, you should still be able to do that as well if you don't quite get a chance to do that right now. But just a little heads up, there are some of those polls, but we'll also be encouraging people to comment in the chat as well, and reflect on some of the questions that we've got within this session. So why are we all here, and what should we be focused on, maybe now, maybe within the future when we head into 2025? So there are some things that are happening within the industry that I think are really worth paying attention to at the moment. The first of which is adaptive learning. So thinking about what that means for you and your business, how you can personalize experiences, how the possibility to do that is much nearer now with the advent of new technologies coming onto the market as well. And then also data. This doesn't really change. I don't think it's been something that people have been speaking about for a while. You can't do any of what I've just said without data from across your business. So we'll take a look at that as well as we go. And then also wrapping it all up with human skills, why now is even more important than ever to think about those human skills that we've got and how we can utilize them to balance out our use of technology, and what some of the examples are that we think L&D particularly need to be developing over the coming months and years as well. So they're things that we're hearing people speak about within the broader industry that we think are really worth honing in on, and we'll do that throughout the session. But to start with, like I said, there are some fundamental kind of BAU, business as usual principles that I really think we need to get right and we need to be focusing on within L&D before we can really approach anything else within our businesses. The first of which is business impact. And in the previous few sessions that I've run on trends over the past couple of years, business impact has always been there. We've been speaking about whatever it is that you're doing, you need to be understanding what you're driving within your business. What are those organizational goals and how are you having an impact against them? And if you're not able to do that and you're not able to link your initiatives to those broader goals, then you really need to take a step back and think about how you're doing that and how you might do that in the future as well. And then secondly, adopting a learning mindset. Now, I'd hope that most people on this call would say that they have a learning mindset, but how do we encourage a learning mindset across our organization, and particularly within our senior leadership team as well? So we'll talk a little bit about that as we go. And then lastly, underpinning it all is inclusion, and why inclusion should be so important and should be thought about from the get-go in anything that we're doing within L&D. So that's what we're going to cover in this session, just a few light topics to get us going. And we'll first off think about those BAU principles and what they mean for us and how we can approach them within our organization. So the first of those, like I said, is business impact. And if you're not already thinking about this and that kind of broader strategy and how you're aligning, now is a good time to take a step back and start thinking about how you're going to do that. I think traditionally, L&D have been very tactical in the way that they approach a lot of problems within their field. So we're often seeing a lot of L&D teams over there on the left-hand side thinking about being tactical and reacting to things and producing things. And whilst there is often a time and place for some of that, how can we shift our thinking a little bit towards being more strategic? And I think there's that kind of fine balance between when do I need to be tactical and when do I need to be strategic. But underpinning it all, it has to be that wider strategy, and you have to come back to that point of reference within all the work that you're doing. I want to reference Laura Overton's L&D values spectrum because I think it's a really great visualization of how you can shift thinking from that more tactical approach to a focus on business performance ultimately. And so we're often seeing, again, learning teams, as I just mentioned, being in that tactical space. But what that means on a practical level is a focus on engagement metrics, on bums on seats, on efficiencies, to Egla's point earlier around how you can save time and resource by utilizing technology. And then a perceived value, so things like CSATs or NPS scores. And whilst there's a huge amount of value in looking at those things, if you're heading towards business performance, you can't look at those things in isolation, I don't think. So how can we shift towards things like time to competency, looking at how we're moving the needle on KPIs? How can we increase skills within our organizations? Are we retaining talent effectively? What does our talent mobility picture look like? And it's really kind of future focused, thinking about those performance and talent the performance and talent data that you have access to within your organization. So you can start off with that engagement stuff on the left-hand side and start to head towards understanding a bigger picture within your business, that where the value is really placed on business outcomes, ultimately creating a culture that you're looking for. So increasing agility, increasing innovation, creating a more inclusive environment through the way that you're approaching business performance in general. And so let's start to think about what is that end point that we're looking towards, and how can we really focus on moving the needle in the right direction and moving away from that view of this many people have completed the course that we've rolled out, because whilst that's great and you need that engagement, you're not really moving the needle on any of your organizational objectives by saying that 100 people have completed a course, for example. So I'd like you all just to have a little reflect on where are you right now, where are you on that journey, because I think, as I said, a lot of people, when Laura Overton first went through this diagram with me, she did suggest that 80 or 90% of the teams that she's worked with are still very much focused on those numbers 1, 2, and 3, and are really trying to then shift over to that 4, 5, and 6 realm. So it'd be really interesting to hear where you think you and your organization are, you and your team are rather, and how many people are over on that 4, 5, and 6, and how many people are going to be honest and say that I'm just starting out on that journey and I'm in that 1, 2, 3 realm. And Andrew, I might need your help here to tell me what's coming through on the chat, if that's okay.
Think you rate yourself, your organization. We're getting some through. So we've got a couple of 3s. We've got 2 to 3, 1 to 2, 1 to 2. Lower than I was expecting, I have to be honest. We're lower than I was expecting. We do have a 5. Says Anna Woodcock says that they're at a 5, using 1 to 3 for supporting arguments. We got this going through. This is what happens when you have hundreds of people in a room. The things spring through so quickly, so I'm trying to catch. 3 to 4 says Adam. Michael says further on the right, but a small team. 3 to 4, 4. Polly says a 5. There's no 6s. No one's going to declare a 6. They're still slightly lower than I would expect. It's surprising, lots of 1, 2s, and 3s, and fewer within that 4 and 5 space. What are your thoughts on that? Oh, and honesty. Says Leo. Nice to see some honesty in the room. What are your thoughts?
And it's not surprising based on what Laura has shared about this model and her research, to show that a lot of L&D are still focused on those 1, 2, and 3, and thinking about how they then make it into that 4, 5, and 6 realm. So yeah, not surprising, and I do really appreciate people sharing that, because it is a journey, and like I said, without those things on the left-hand side, it's really difficult to then get towards shifting the needle on other stuff. So it's really important to be there. So
absolutely. And Vietska says we want to reach 4 and 5, but we're measuring number 1. And I think that's one of the problems we have, and the challenges we have, I think it is absolutely spot on, is that with the quick gains, as Stephen says, is the 1 and 2 numbers. So we can pick up and collect 1 and 2 easily. The others are a little bit more difficult to find.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrew. That was really helpful. And so I'd like to pass over to Beck at this point to talk about some of that broader picture and what it means at Burger King to put that kind of stuff into context, if that's okay, Beck.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for us, by no means, I kind of said this last week when Helen and I discussed this last week, we're not perfect. I'd like to think we're kind of veering more towards the right-hand side of that kind of scale, but actually I do feel fortunate in a lot of respects, because actually I joined the business, as I said, in 2021. Oh, am I still there? My screen just turned off. Helen, can you hear me?
I can still hear and see you. Yeah.
That was bizarre. It just went onto Teams for some reason. So there we go, live technology. So sorry, yeah, as I said, I joined the business in 2021. Our headcount is 6,000 people, but our head office team is around about 135 at the minute, and it's kind of stayed consistent the whole time. So we are a relatively small business. And when I joined the business, it was really the opportunity to start a talent development strategy from scratch. There was nothing in place other than some amazing, fantastic, the technical, the operational kind of basics were there. But because we had this growth plan of the kind of number of sites we wanted to open in a short space of time, and we had a plan to acquire smaller franchisees and bring them internal, I guess it was that whole right, we need someone in, we need to create a role that's going to help grow the business. And I had that really fortunate position where I was brought in to kind of create the talent development strategy, and I could support business growth. So my first one-to-one with our CEO, just think this is really refreshing and probably not reflective of where a lot of people would be. But when I asked Al, I said, what's really important to you, and the culture we kind of create, and what do you want people to, what do you value? And the first thing he said was fun, which was, I think that is a gift for me. I want to come to work and have fun. It's really important. And Al's comments were all around, people spend so much time at work. He wants people to enjoy coming to work, and he wants us to make it fun. So that was the first thing he kind of requested, which was amazing. The second one, no surprise, we're a private equity backed business. We need results. So obviously the growth was coming from, we want to open these sites. We need to kind of get the results and open really successful sites. So results is really important. And then the third thing, again, with us being almost a startup at the point, even at the point I joined, it's about being intellectually curious. So seeing what the people are doing, and we had a town hall yesterday, and that still resonates. We were talking about some competitors that have opened, and he was asking, his call to action for the restaurant managers to get into those sites and see what it is they're doing, what we can learn. So that was kind of the starting point, really, in terms of things that he really values and he wants to kind of see replicated through the business. And then when I asked him specifically for me in my role, like what does he want? So agility was in there. So obviously we work at pace, and we've worked at pace since I've been here. We still work at pace now. And he believes that's kind of our competitive advantage. So in COVID, we were the first QSR to kind of open again. Yeah, QSR, quick service restaurants. So again, agility. That's what we are. So we need to be kind of quick with what we're doing. Growing our people, again, really about kind of supporting that business growth. When I joined the business in 2021, we were opening restaurants, and the whole restaurant team was external. So 100% external recruits of management, recruits of, crew members. And we knew there was an opportunity there to grow our own people. So we didn't have any programs in place to kind of make that happen. And then the final thing, and something it rings true for me. I'm an operator by background from years and years ago, and I don't believe in loads of kind of fancy, complicated models, but actually let's keep it simple for our team. So a lot of the work I do look after our head office team, which is called Whopper Support. Everyone loves a Whopper pun. But yeah, our Whopper Support team as well. But ultimately, the majority of our workforce are kind of in operations. We have, over 70 nationalities. Whatever we deliver needs to really resonate. So keep it simple and not overcomplicate things. So my role at the beginning was to kind of set the clarity around the expectations, provide, some basic standards of, we've reviewed role profiles. What does that mean? We created, really simple kind of steps to get between the levels. But I guess for me, the whole time when I started, my line manager, we had on there, by 2024, we wanted to become an employer of choice. So even though I kind of had my strategy and it was quite tactical in part to kind of grow the talent, we wanted that kind of overarching longer term goal. And obviously we're in 2024 now and it went like that. But yeah, there's some work we've been doing, and we're probably in a position now we're going to start looking at best companies for this year in terms of kind of entry for that, because there is loads of great stuff we have done. We're not finished. I don't think we'll ever be finished. I'm never kind of happy with everything. So yeah, I hope that answers the question, Helen. We're kind of hopefully more towards the right. However, I do think we've got work to do to prove efficiencies, which when we introduced Thrive 6 months ago, we're now able to kind of look at reducing kind of some the training completion times and prove some more kind of ROI in the system that we've invested in as well. So it's important, I think, to keep everything going, isn't it, and keep your metrics going. And as I say, we're kind of results focused, but with the great culture, hopefully, that I think we've got, and the engagement survey kind of backs up as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Beck. And interestingly, as you were speaking there was a question that came through on the chat around how you can, any tips on how to get my leadership team to the 4, 5, and 6 instead of focusing on the 1, 2, 3. And I think you've indicated that just having a conversation about what's important to them is probably a really great place to start in terms of actually how can I align to what's important and where do I need to move the needle, but also understanding that broader goal and saying, well, do you want us to talk about the completion rates, or would you like us to prove that we're, I don't know, retaining more talent, or we're increasing the amount of people that are moving to positions internally rather than having to hire externally, and therefore saving the business money? Of course, the leadership team are going to be focused on those other things rather than just saying, oh yeah, people have completed the training. But is there anything else you'd add to answer that question?
Yeah, I think for me, with that one, the completion, I think there's always that balance of compliance, and eliminating risk is really super important. And it's not the most exciting part of my job, but I have to make sure that part happens as well. But yeah, we set the stretch targets. So as I say, we're recruiting 100% external teams. I want a 70% internal fill rate. We're at that for our BAU estate now, which we weren't at that. Again, we were probably around about kind of 55, 60 when I joined. But now within our NROs, which are new restaurant openings, if I could jump into NRO, that's what that means. But with our NROs now as well, we set a stretch of 50% internal fill. And actually some of the sites we've opened have been at kind of 75%. So I think it's just being really ambitious with your targets and try and get people excited in the business. And as I say, we've got a really small board, so I kind of know all the exec team, and we kind of talk about these things quite openly. And as long as I know that other stuff's kind of ticking over in the background, we just focus on more of these kind of bigger aspirational goals. And then that's the kind of focus and priority with my team as well, that we know we're kind of getting after that, and we talk about that a lot. So the other things just kind of keep ticking, but then you move towards more of the right-hand side.
Yeah, and you also touched on learning mindset, which I think is probably quite crucial in this situation as well, thinking about how people show up in terms of thinking about what learning could be or what it could bring to a business. And your CEO's focus on people turning up to work and having fun and it being a great place to work tells a good story about their thinking when it comes to what a good workplace looks like, and how everyone else can align to creating that experience for people that therefore hopefully feeds into those broader metrics that you were just speaking about. But I just wanted to take a second just to differentiate the two concepts of growth mindset and learning mindset here, because I think there are elements that are interchangeable, but they are also distinct. So thinking about how a growth mindset is reflective and based on, I suppose, lessons learned, things that have happened in the past that you can move forward from, and focus on changing your attitude and changing the way that you might show up in the future based on past experience. Where learning mindset, I think, is very much focused on how do I get better? How do I fill those knowledge gaps that I have? If I want to get here in the future, what is it going to take for me to get there? And that's really where learning mindset comes into the picture for me. And I think that there's an interesting conversation to be had about how are people showcasing a learning mindset within your organization, and how are your leadership team in particular not only showing growth mindset, but also the curiosity to have a learning mindset as well. And that could be a conversation starter when you're thinking about how you're communicating with your leadership team as well. So to move on to inclusion, I know, Beck, this is pretty much over to you straight away, but I think it's really important to point out that in any initiative that we're running as an L&D function, you need to be thinking about how you approach it as inclusively as possible from the get-go. Otherwise, you end up with having to backtrack and change the way you do things because you haven't thought about it from the start. And I know, Beck, obviously your role covers DE&I within your organisation anyway, but you've got some really good, I think, stories to share from Burger King in terms of how you're approaching inclusivity as a building block essentially within your business?
Yeah, thanks, Helen. So again, I took over inclusion as part of my role at the end of kind of last year, but there was lots of work happening when I joined the business. So in 2021 and 2022, we worked with Berwick and Partners. They came into the business and did a whole big deep dive and looked at, surveyed our execs, spoke to all our teams, weekend, evening team members, to really look at kind of what are our teams saying and how can we be more inclusive. They also looked at all our data and all the reams and reams of data that we had, and it's quite difficult because obviously we've acquired lots of different franchisees, so the data wasn't the easiest to read and decipher. However, we kind of worked with those as a group of experts that then fed back to us in terms of what their recommendations were. At the same time as well, 2021, 2022, the impact of Brexit really kicked in and hit hospitality quite hard. And we did have, we lost a lot of our kind of hourly paid workforce. So I think in 2021, we lost 2,500 people, which is obviously huge. And what we did find is a lot of those people were leaving within the first 3 months. And I think that was about half of them. So we knew also it wasn't just a case of the experienced team members were leaving, but actually whatever we were doing wasn't great from an experiential point of view for people coming into the business. At the time, it was really difficult to recruit, again, coming off the back of furlough and Brexit. So we had all these challenges. So we worked with a company called Chatter, who looked at our EVP, and they also did lots of surveys with our team members and looked at kind of what does it mean to work at Burger King. And at the same time, because we were losing all these people, we had an internal focus group as well, cross-functional, kind of looking at all the data. So we had loads of data, we had loads of stories. And then, it's like, what are we going to do with this now? How is this, all this data we've got, how is it going to make a real tangible difference to our people and to our teams? So what we did, we kind of worked with the exec initially, and then we worked with our senior ops team, and the people promise pillars there are the result of the Chatter work. So we landed on kind of 3 people promise pillars, which are whopping support, whopping fun, and whopping opportunities. And really that became our kind of DNA of how we are. And obviously it marries what Al was already previously saying to me and kind of hit my one-to-one with him about people coming to work and enjoying it. But this is all around allowing people to be the true selves and as people, crew member to crew member, manager to crew member, support to restaurant manager, these people pillars, we really wanted to bring them to life. So we created some people engagement days, and that was our, our real kind of starting point in terms of how we can take these messages out to the business. And as I say, previously we were kind of very operational focused. So this is what we're about. We'll share the data with you. We'll let you have a look at that. We'll introduce you to our people pillars. And then we did some activities around inclusion, active listening, and empathy. And again, those really kind of great human people skills that are really super important. But again, we just wanted to kind of raise awareness of them. So that was our starting point of what we expected, of inclusion. And then we did lots of work. We've looked at kind of inductions, resetting expectations, getting everyone really clear and consistent. And that's been the journey we've been on. And then introducing Thrive has been a massive help for us with that, because actually where we've acquired, sometimes we acquire one business, one site from a franchise. Sometimes we might acquire 17. We acquired 73 or 74 at the end of 2022. So constantly trying to keep everyone aligned and get them to that kind of same message about what's important to us has been really kind of key for this inclusion message. So just keeping the consistency going. Thrive hugely supports us. And then we're members of the British Retail Consortium, the BRC. And this year we also introduced a platform called WorkL, which is our engagement survey, which I'm sure many people on here will be familiar with. And this year the BRC actually pulled some data down, they looked at kind of all these businesses have got these great strategies on kind of inclusion. What does it mean for the lived experiences of our team members? So they pulled 12 questions, which gave an inclusion score. So that inclusion score, I think it might be 7.1 actually, but we were checking this before, but yeah, I think the BRC average was kind of 7.1, and on the same questions on our survey, we scored 7.7, which is higher than the BRC. I've shared that because I'm being open. We're not perfect, and as my next point says, we're always going to be evolving. The real positives out of that inclusion score were, there were 2 questions we scored 8.4, and that was, I have a good relationship with my line manager, and I have enough information and training to do my job well. So for those to score 8.4, that was really good. I took the positive from that. The ones that we didn't score as highly on were around kind of pay and recognition, and that's been consistent probably in whatever business I've worked in over the years. And again, I'm not making an excuse. That's something we need to face into. I was at a financial wellbeing forum last week, and we've got some great ideas we can help in terms of kind of the pay and things. So it's really useful for us to kind of get that data from our teams and look at what we can do. And then we'll do that report every kind of 6 months going forward. So that's going to give me an ongoing measure. So again, going back to the data, there's other things as well. I thought we'd have loads of time today, Helen, but I don't think we're going to do. But I'll just touch on briefly. So in July this year, we've been working with the Shaw Trust, and we've got our level 2 disability confident employer. And we've done a lot of work with the DWP, and we're looking at different employability schemes. So we've partnered with Street League, and one of our regional operations managers up in Scotland, he kind of champions that. We've done a pilot in Scotland, and now we're going to cascade that through the UK. Again, to really help kind of social mobility and help young people get into work, because we know there's a bit of an issue there. And then we've just supported the summer programme with UK Youth, which was a government kind of back fund as well. So there's lots more work to come in that area. So I think for us, it's kind of always evolving and not resting on your laurels. And I think it can be quite daunting, inclusion. And I thought when I took it on, I was like, where do we even start with this? So it's just kind of trying to think about, simplify it, keep the consistency going, keep the messaging going. And having a platform like Thrive is great for us, because it means we could just keep that agenda alive, and we can keep talking about different topics. And we've done Pride Month, we've done Disability Pride, and it just keeps those messages kind of going all year round, really. So it's not a kind of one and done, it's a how do we keep evolving it.
Yeah, great, Beck. Thank you for sharing all that. And I'm sure there'll be lots of questions for you in the chat as well about all the work that you're doing in this area, because there's so much good stuff to share as well. And I would encourage you to reach out and chat to Beck if you do have any questions on that as well. But I think your point, Beck, about keeping it simple and starting off with the data that you do have available is a really great place to start. I know one of the questions that's just come through from Chris Giddings was about what's more valuable, quantitative or qualitative feedback and metrics. And I suppose my personal reflection on that is it depends what you're looking for and what questions you're asking, and both have a huge amount of value in any situation. It just depends what you're looking for, and the qualitative data can often tell you a lot more about what your people are thinking and feeling than the quantitative stuff can as well. So Beck, I don't know if you want to build on that or challenge that.
No, I totally agree. And I think off the back of the employee survey, there was 2,000 comments, and I went through and read them all, because I think that for me, storytelling is such an important part of our role. And data is great, but actually bring it to life, and what does it mean for our people? I think they're the things that I personally remember, and I think they're the things that I hang on to. Leavers feedback, we do that every month. I kind of read through that, identify where these things that are coming up. And yes, statistics are great out there because it gives us a benchmark, but actually what does it actually truly mean to our people? And that's kind of where I'm at. So it's a balance of both, but I do think your storytelling is very, very powerful.
Yeah, definitely. Storytelling, great. I think we actually spoke about that in the last trends session that we did as well. So great to bring it back into. It's almost like you were probably part of the audience on that one, Beck. So let's move on. So we've covered business impact there. We've covered inclusion, and we've covered data as well. I think we covered that as well. Now I'm getting confused about where we are in the deck. But let's talk about adaptive learning. So I think, as I said right at the beginning, that there's a huge possibility here to create experiences that are truly personalized now, based on the influx of AI and how products are adapting to utilizing AI in order to create those more personalized experiences. And that's really exciting, because I don't think we've really been at a stage where we can do that effectively before. However, I'd really like to ask you what you think in terms of, have you ever been able to predict what your employees need before they need it? Is that, is that BAU for you within your organization? So feel free to, again, scan the QR code here or join at slido.com. And we'll see those answers start to come in as well. I can see that there's already been a question about, with 6,000 employees, how do you personalize learning? That's great. I'm sure there's a lot of people in this situation as well, and I think it probably depends on a lot of technology that you probably have within your business, in terms of how do those tools already allow you to create personalized experiences. And there's also a level of personalized experience here for me as well. It's very unlikely we're going to get to a point where it's going to be completely unique to one individual, but maybe a team of people or a group of people might be given more personalized experiences. But again, it depends on what technology you've got available to you, and what you actually want to create, what experience you want to create for people. But I think with developments to a lot of learning platforms as well, people can log on to them and their experience be tailored to them based on who they are, what they've done previously, what they probably need for their role as well. So I think that's potentially a hugely exciting area as well. So watch out for that. Essentially, I'm just watching the results come through, so it seems like people often have answered sometimes. And Andrew, you just popped up, so I'm presuming.
Yeah, it's very much, it's that I think it depends, and I'd love to know the text that goes behind that and the thinking behind that. I answered sometimes just because, do you know what? Well, I think I know what people want, and then I find out actually no, they want something else entirely. So that ability to predict, I think, is really interesting. And I'd love to know if we can definitively say yes, we know everything that they need. I would argue we probably don't have a clue sometimes, to use the word sometimes again.
Yeah, and I think it is that we often think that we know, but do we really know? And how much employee listening are we doing in that situation? However, how is that employee listening experience going to shift with tools or technology that are available to us now, that can maybe bridge that gap much faster than it would take an L&D team time to gather all of that information and all that qualitative feedback that we just mentioned as well. So it'll be an interesting one to watch out for, I'm sure.
Fabulous. I'll let you go again, because we've got more quizzes, we've got more surveys to come up.
So I'll just flick over to the next one. Is are you able to identify that a specific individual loves to, let's say, listen to podcasts in the morning and take part in virtual events in the afternoons? It'd be interesting to see the answers to this one, because when I'm thinking about technology that can adapt to my way of existing, perhaps I don't really notice that there's a pattern in my own behavior, but actually a system can start to do that for you and start to recognize those patterns in your behavior in a way that you wouldn't necessarily have reflected upon yourself, unless you were forced to, and you were physically, literally asked that question. So I think this is a really interesting one, and I think, based on what's coming up on screen so far, it's not a surprise to me that no is the overarching answer, because I think that this is not something that is commonplace at the moment, but again, something that might be a possibility in the very near future as well, based on that experience. So just let any more responses. I can't see that this is going to shift dramatically in a different direction. I'm not sure how many people have managed to answer yet, but really interesting to see that overarching no on that one. And then lastly, are your experts across the business able to distribute their knowledge easily to others? Now, this is a really interesting one, I think, because this is often a pain point for a lot of people, in that they have siloed knowledge across the business, and it's really difficult to link it all together and to give people the opportunity to share effectively. So how can, again, new technologies enable us to do that, and to prompt people to do that as well? And I apologize for the spelling error on sometimes here. That's glaring now. I'm looking at it. It's glaring me in the face. So before anyone picks me up in the chat, I'll apologize right now. but I'm presuming you've all managed to figure out what I meant by that word. Interestingly, you've got no and sometimes here in quite close alignment, that actually sometimes your experts are able to distribute knowledge, but often they aren't either. So how will new technologies create an experience where those experts are maybe surfaced, they're encouraged to share, they're asked to share in a way that isn't maybe just, let's record a video of this, please. And Andrew, if you've got anything to reflect on here as well, please feel free to jump in.
Absolutely. So looking at the comments, the fabulous comment from Chris is we're seeing an increase in user-generated content here. So I think it's really interesting. We look at experts distributing knowledge, but what about users distributing knowledge? I have this ongoing conversation with people about learning culture. Is you already have a learning culture. It's just not the culture you want. And the culture is people sticking Post-it notes and emailing stuff to each other and having a chat around the coffee machine, which is people sharing on a user level. But it's that expert level that we worry about when actually we're trading information, sharing information all the time. And again, Jana has also picked up, again, there's a discrepancy between the options and potential uptake as well. So just because you put the stuff out there, it's the field of dreams. If we build it, no, they don't actually come. We put the content there and then no one uses it.
Yeah, and I suppose then it comes back to the point around that kind of, what are we predicting what people need, or are we actually giving them what they need as well? And but also then the whole comms piece and the marketing piece in there as well. So yeah, it's quite a complex picture I imagine to unpick there. But the point about UGC is really interesting, because obviously from a Thrive perspective, UGC has always been something that has previously been really important to us in how you can get all of that good stuff out of someone's head and into the hands of other people, essentially. But also, what does expert mean? Someone might not necessarily determine that they are an expert when actually they won't. In fact, I went to an event yesterday where I asked that specific question to an audience of about 60 people, and I said, who here is an expert in their field? And nobody put their hands up. And I know for a fact that was just not true. So it's it's an interesting way, like there's some difficulty in approaching this idea of the expert within a business as well. So how do we change up the semantics around that too? So yeah, interesting reflections there. So thank you all for taking part in those polls. Ultimately, I think what I wanted to hone in on here was that if you are able to learn faster than your competitors, you'll be creating a competitive advantage for yourself. And in creating experiences that are adaptive, that are more personalized, you are going to create that competitive advantage. So what tools do you have available to you that can start you on that road now to make sure your people are getting the right information at the right time? And are you genuinely solving the right problem with the stuff that you're putting out there and giving people as well? And Beck, I'll pass over to you to talk a little bit more around this as well.
Yeah, and I know there was a question on this as well in terms of kind of how we're personalising our learning. And we introduced Thrive in March this year, so we're kind of just 6 months into our journey, and there's a lot of work, and we get kind of great support from Eugene and the team in terms of like opportunities. But for us now, we really want to focus on kind of the reduction in time to competency, which is a really kind of big focus of ours. And as well, engaging compliance. I know I alluded to it, and I shouldn't be negative about compliance because it keeps us all safe. But actually, how can we make it more engaging? Because I think we've all been there before. When we do the same thing, annual thing, you click the button, it doesn't, it never changes. So that's quite exciting for me, that we can make it a bit more engaging and meet the individual needs of the learner. And then there's a lot, I think, in terms of kind of multi-generational workforce, which is a real challenge for us. We have our Gen Zs in the restaurants being managed by people who've been in the restaurant for 43 years, I think how long this serving RM is. So actually, how can we support kind of that through personalisation and really help the workforce, and then ultimately increase retention? I know there's been a couple of questions on retention, which I think we'll probably come to at the end. But actually, just having a more engaging learning experience for your team members and keeping them. People do want to learn. I do find that we've not switched on our user-generated content yet, interestingly, but we have actually just seconded in one of our crew members from one of our sites who's going to be making some content for us. So he started yesterday. He's like super excited. So yeah, I think there's lots more work for us to do in this area. By a long way, we know we're kind of into this journey yet. I know it's a new trend, emerging trend, but yeah, we're right at the start of the journey, Helen.
Yeah, and it'd be great to come back and revisit what that looks like in 6 months' time, because I imagine so much will change in that period. But also, I think you're making an interesting point here around that, connecting newer generations coming into the workforce with longer serving employees as well. And how do you, and I suppose this links in with the idea of expert as well, and how do you get that knowledge across the business and to the right people at the right time? And so there's a real possibility there, I think, which is interesting to look out for. I think particularly with new generations coming into the workforce, their experience of technology is drastically different to someone who's probably been with the business for 43 years. And so how can they each learn from each other, and how do you create those moments of opportunity as well? I'm just going to move on to data now, as the next trend that is, I'm saying is a trend, but it just underpins everything that we should be doing in L&D. So it's not necessarily a trend. It's just maybe also should be included in BAU. But in regards to the conversation around AI, you can't utilize AI effectively without the data underpinning it in order to understand what it is that you want to do, how you want to move the needle, what the story is across your business already. So I just encourage people to reflect on what data you have access to right now. So how do you identify those data sources? How do you analyze that data? Egla in her session again pointed out that you can actually utilize AI quite effectively to analyze data sets. And if you're not doing that already, it saves a hell of a lot of time. So think about how you analyze that data and who you can bring in to help you do that. And then ultimately, how do you build effective relationships across your business in order to gather that data and to understand what's going on elsewhere? Because L&D shouldn't be working in a silo. They should be working cross-functionally across the business. So these are some starting points here for you. But Beck, I know that you're going to expand on that in just a minute. But ultimately, just wanted to reflect in the chat again, where are the best sources of data found in your business? So if you just want to pop that in the chat, we can come back to the answers to that question in a minute. So where are the best sources of data found in your business? I'm asking that because it's unlikely that an L&D team have access to all of the data they need just as standard. They have to build those relationships. So we'll see what you all say. But in the meantime, Beck, if you want to dig into that a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I say, kind of one of our big areas of growth was our NROs, so new restaurant openings. And you can imagine wherever there's a CapEx investment and a business has, we've got investors, we've got our master franchisee RBI looking at us. So our new restaurants really need to be successful. And I think we were opening a record number of restaurants. We were opening them with fully external teams, but then that had impact in terms of labour turnover figures and then ultimately performance figures. It also meant we were kind of soft launching restaurants. So we were opening them and kind of then staggering the opening hours. We were not necessarily introducing all the home delivery aggregators straight away. So we knew we had an opportunity for our NROs. And I think for us, really, that was the thing that we needed to tackle. So done lots of work over the last few years in terms of how we open these restaurants to get to where we've got to today. And it's not just any one thing. I think there's been lots of trial and error. I'm just conscious of time now. But yeah, I guess one of the big things we did, we pulled together our talent acquisition and the talent development team. So we pulled those teams together last year. Again, that's really helped us drive the internal progression into the new restaurant openings. It's really helped us identify quickly where things might be going wrong between recruitment and induction, and how we can close those gaps again, create a better kind of experience for people. Getting consistency of training, consistency of expectation. We aim to open every restaurant now with the restaurant manager that's internal. If we don't, then we'll second an internal manager in for the first 3 months to kind of help that transition. And then I have one people training manager. Basically, she remote manages. We've got regional kind of managers in all the a regional expert, I guess. We call them CRTs, which is irrelevant because it's a bit of a weird name. But yeah, Val will oversee the remote training, I guess, and induction of these teams. And having a platform like Thrive now means we can keep on top. So we've got that expectation of what they need to deliver. The impact has been massive in terms of us being able to, as I say, remote manage these openings. We do kind of a training for success. We check that the training sites we're using the correct sites, but we now have really massive big bold openings, which is fantastic. So what that means is we're hitting the money more quickly. We opening with full opening hours. Lisa, our NRO kind of managers, like super excited by this, and what it means, probably that's the difference. We had 2 weeks ago, we opened our Northwich site. That was our record opening we've ever had since we've owned the business. And probably like on a week by week basis, we're probably taking an extra £10,000 a week per restaurant now to what we would have been doing maybe like 2-3 years ago, because we've got all these kind of ducks in a row. So again, it's what's all those data sources telling you, kind of how can we just look at the story behind kind of what's happening in these new restaurants and what are all the things we can put in place. And as I say, it's not been any one thing, it's been a multitude of different things we've done. But yeah, I think we're in a really good place now going into next year, where we're going to probably have about another 20 openings again next year.
Yeah, so it's an amazing story. And ultimately, what is really important to pull out there is that journey, gathering that data, understanding where the problem points were, the pain points that you were trying to solve, has ultimately led to, and I won't quote you on it because I know you're still working out the figures exactly, but potentially £10,000 of cost saving for the business, which is exactly what your leadership team will want to be hearing. So, you know, it's to come back to that point about why it's so important to think about those performance and talent areas instead of just bums on seats. It's because of things like that. And Andrew, I know that you've had some interesting reflections in the chat based on my previous question as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting just looking at the results and the things that people have said, and it's LMS, it's users entered profiles, it's HR data, it's primarily the HR and people data. And interestingly, there's 2 points have come out from this one. Number one is that, as Adam has said, it's a big problem. It's spread around everywhere, and there's loads of really good data, but trying to find that data is actually problematic because it's spread so far and it's spread so wide. Leo said go deep on the business data because that's the way we can demonstrate we exist. But I think Anna has actually summed this up beautifully. L&D is a bit fearful of change. We work for organizations where L&D don't conduct good surveying and want to find out that data because they thought the feedback might be that, you know, maybe the quality of the work isn't so great. And so there's a fear of going, well, actually, do we make any difference whatsoever? And I think that is part of the problem that we've got within the L&D space.
Yeah, but also, you know, you can't rest on your laurels there either. If you're not, you know, you need to have that data to in order to improve. So if you're not, if you don't think that you're performing and that stops you from, that makes you hesitant about doing good quality surveys, that's a problem in itself in terms of your own mindset, but also maybe your team's capability or impact as well. So,
and you would think that everybody is agreeing with Anna. Everybody's agreeing with Anna. There's 7 people have given 100% and confirming it. So there is definitely a fear out there, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, it is really interesting, and good to share it as well, because, you know, it does show that you're not alone in your thinking, but how can you challenge thinking on that and shift towards gaining some data in order to I'm just conscious of time. I've got another few slides to flick through, so I'll move on to the next section.
You've got 5 minutes.
5 minutes
in
great.
total.
Good stuff. So to wrap it up and end on ultimately on human skills, because I think it's no surprise that as we utilize more and new technology that's coming onto the market, we really need to lean into our human skills and our human capability in order to get better and ultimately move the needle on performance, essentially. And ultimately then, how can technology enhance our human experience as well? But then on the flip side of this, how can our human skills change our experience of technology as well. Now, just wanted to highlight a few skills that are coming out as important in the research that I'm currently doing on gender equity in L&D, which is open to everyone. The 5 top human skills that are coming out from L&D teams are, no surprise probably to anyone on this call, critical thinking, problem solving, collaboration, and then equal to each other are emotional intelligence, growth mindset, and creativity as well. A lot of that stuff we've kind of touched on today, but ultimately, how are you thinking about developing those within your business as well? If critical thinking is so important, and again, not surprising that is one of the top skills that's coming out as one that L&D teams need for future career success. So there's an element of upskilling for your own internal capability here as well. And then just quickly to summarize Egla's report earlier, sorry if this slide is not too clear, you can find it in her report that she did with Don Taylor. She created this S-curve on the AI in L&D complexity scale, which shows that L&D is very much over there focused on efficiency focuses in L&D, so administrative tasks and learning design and content focused stuff. But actually, in order to get over to the right hand side in terms of utilizing AI for skills practice, data analysis, performance, skills management, all that good stuff, what you need to do is build effective relationships across your business. So how do you lean into those human skills in order to start moving the needle on those areas? And I think that is the problem point for me, is that L&D don't have effective relationships across the business in order to start doing that and utilizing the right technology there. So just a quick reflection on what Egla shared this morning as well. And Beck, I'm going to hand over to you with, 2 minutes left to go to talk about how this is surfacing.
Yeah, I'll be quick. And I think, look, we all know automation is here. We introduced like kiosks into our restaurants and things. I think one of the big things we've identified, we've run a 12-week trial in some of our restaurants on kind of a host role. And actually what we found is bringing crew members out of the kitchen and into the front house area. We've got some real gaps there in terms of some basic, what we would assume would be basic communication skills. So we really need to face into these ourselves at Burger King, and that's what we'll be working on kind of into 2025. That's one of them. I've kind of alluded to the generational kind of shifts and actually managing multi-generation kind of workforces. And I think here there's a real kind of shift for me in terms of previously it was a one size fits all, like we'll treat everyone equal. For now, the big message here for me is about equity and how we can give people what they specifically need. And I think that's the shift that we're seeing and helping, again, some of our longer serving managers understand kind of equity and what that means. And that's a real focus for us. And finally, leadership. So as Helen just touched on there, emotional intelligence is huge, and it is the differential between the kind of the AI world and keep these real human connections going. So for me, leadership is a huge part of what we're starting to focus on. We didn't have a common language to kind of talk about kind of human behaviors, and we just recently started introducing insights, and we're on that bit of a journey now as a rollout, and the impact of that has been fantastic, because I think everything starts with self-awareness, and as much as we've kind of dipped our toe in, this is our real focus now for 2025 and helping people be better leaders, really.
And I'll let you sum up all of that, Beck, with this wonderful quote.
Yeah, and again, this quote was from 2018 and from the London School of Economics, and I think it kind of resonated with me at the time when I saw it. So in the past, jobs were all about muscles. Now they're about brains, but in the future they'll be about the heart. And I think that is the whole, that's what makes us human, isn't it? Right. So actually, the ability to connect, to create that sense of belonging for our people, create that safety, really. And I think for me, that's kind of where we're kind of headed, and I think it's really important just to kind of touch on that as we close off. 1 minute left.
Great way to end, Beck. And I did have a slide saying, what questions do you have for us? But I'm really sorry, we probably have no time for that. But if we
have no time for the questions, what I would suggest is people who've got questions is to message into Becca and to Helen directly. We've got the questions here. I think you two guys need to write a blog post and just explain, what you mean or from some of the questions. The questions have been fantastic. Thank you both. Please in the chat. Just leave your comments on what you thought of the session. There's so much good stuff in there. So much good stuff in there. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Helen. Really, really good to hear from you both. We'll be back at 1:30. Apologies if you can hear any building noise in the background, where we've got Ben Wynne Simmons in a session sponsored by Veed, looking beyond the buzz and AI video for learning and development. I will hope to see more of you then. Go away, have a nice lunch, have a break if you can, and we will see you again in an hour's time. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.